Hello, I am back. I'm trying to gather some content for the Old Testament so that I can post a lot more regular and just be a lot more committed to following Come Follow Me throughout the Old Testament. This week in Doctrine and Covenants, we're looking at Doctrine and Covenants 137 and 138. Instead of giving a full summary, I just wanted to give some insight into one of the key verses that is found in Doctrine and Covenants 137. In Doctrine and Covenants 137, we have this verse in verse 9, "For I, the Lord, will judge all men according to their works, according to the desires of their heart." Now, this verse is one that's often referenced by memory, and it's very important. We are always, I think, individually wondering what that judgment looks like. And the topic of judgment, the key principle that we always need to remember when we're talking about judgment of this sort, because this is a judgment that is more of the final judgment. Katakrino would be the Greek word for that, a complete, that's kind of the condemnation type judgment. Though the key principle there is that is not for us. That's not our domain. Now, of course, we wonder, and I think God knows and acknowledges that we wonder. And so the key principle of judgment is always one, God is our judge, not us. And thank goodness. And if we learn in first John, if you read that writing in the New Testament, it says, God is greater than our heart. If our heart condemn us, know that God is greater than our heart. Thank goodness God is our judge and not ourselves, because God is greater than our hearts. He's greater than our sense of justice, greater than our sense of mercy, greater than our love that we can imagine. So thank goodness that God is the judge of all men. God will judge us according to our works and our desires. The idea that God is the judge of our works, you can go to the book of Revelation to find similar, as well as, the Sermon on the Mount, by their fruits you shall know them. Now that's specific to judging false prophets. But we also have in the Sermon on the Mount that not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. What does it mean that God will judge according to the desires of their heart? Now, this in the context of Doctrine and Covenants 137, we have also all that shall die henceforth without a knowledge of the gospel, who would have received it with all their hearts, shall be heirs of that kingdom. God is the judge of the desires of our heart. I think this is something that we, when something is so true, it really comes in at a deep level very quickly and almost becomes self-evident and common knowledge. And I think that this principle and concept was one that was so true that it just passed through very quickly to a point that it became so self-evident that we probably don't fully appreciate the magnitude of this idea that God judges us according to the desires of our hearts. Now we know this is not the only time that this has been mentioned. If you go in the scriptures, we have in Alma a similar idea. The wording is a little bit different. So instead of the word judge, we have this idea, which is it's an aspect of judge. And this might be a better way of looking at the judgment, because a lot of times we think of the judge as, I'm here to condemn you. I'm here to pass judgment. Doctrine and Covenants 111. I think I brought that up in every single one of the podcasts. And that idea is that God will grant unto men that, oh man, I've already forgot this. As fast as God will grant us according to, I'm gonna have to look it up now. Time has erased that. This is what happens when I spend my time in the Old Testament. I forget Doctrine and Covenants 111:11. It is as fast as I will order all things to your good, as fast as you are able to receive them. I beat the technology that's there to help me. But it's here just so you can see it for those of you who want to that. I will order all things for your good as fast as you are able to receive them. Now, I believe that is the framing that is like the best framing of so much of the gospel. Becoming or receiving. Now, that becoming is part of it, right? God will judge us according to our works, but a lot of this is how willing are we to receive things. So, yeah, Alma 29 uses more of a reception type language. I ought not to harrow up in my desires the firm decree of a just God, for I know that he granteth unto men according to their desires, whether it be unto death or unto life. Yea, I know he allotteth unto men, yea, he decreeth unto them decrees which are unalterable, according to their wills, whether they be unto salvation or unto destruction. What a powerful description of agency, the power that is that rests within us, that we all have, what it means to have free will and agency. Or if we think about the most recent General Conference, a great talk was on moral agency, that God has given us this agency so that we can act for good. And we know in the opposition of all things, that also opens up the opportunity for evil acts to occur as well. The key then is the question is what does it mean for God to judge us according to our desires? And from an introspective perspective, we would then wonder, what do we desire? Now, here we have, see if I can find the old King James version here. But you can, if you have the visual here, you can read all sorts of different translations of this. So here we have Deuteronomy 8:2. And you shall remember that the Lord your God led you all the way in these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you and test you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. In this parable, we can take this literal event as a parable for us. The 40 years, the period of testing, we know that in Abraham, that this life is a test. Part of the test is to know what is in our heart, whether we will keep the commandments of God or not. Will we keep the commandments of God under pressure? How much do we desire to keep the commandments of God? And God will grant us according to our desires, unto eternal life or unto destruction. It's hard to understand what we desire. So the reason it's hard is because I have a background in understanding some psychology, and the more that you start to dig into the psychology of it, this self is a very, very complex thing. What I mean by self, you could say you are a complex thing. You and I, as human beings, as individuals, are quite complex. So what does it mean to have that God will judge us according to our desires? Now, this is just a representation. I'm not saying this is the representation. I'm not saying this is doctrine. This is Carl Jung's model of the psyche. And what he has here is you've got your persona, an ego, the self, the shadow, the animus, the anima, and conscious, unconscious. And so you have things that you're aware of and things that you're not aware of. And we can look at this in the term of motivation and desire. Now, those are big, big psychological terms. And because they're big psychological terms, when I think about God judging us according to our desires, this is where it gets tricky. Because I believe that innately we have many, many instincts, motivations, and desires. And many of those in this shadow, if I used a Freudian concept, I would say you have this id, these animal desires. Perhaps a part of us may even desire terrible things. It may desire violence. It desires hedonistic things. Part of me desires to have that Ferrari, that Lamborghini. Part of me maybe desires to be better than other people. The natural man is an enemy to God, and that's part of who we are. St. Augustine said that we have brother donkey to deal with, and it's really hard navigating this life atop the donkey that is the mortal body, which includes the natural man. And the natural man includes unconscious, and maybe things that you're conscious of, desires. And they tempt us. Alma, 2 Nephi 2, it says we got to have these desires to tug on us both ways, or else we couldn't have that moral agency. So when we say that God will judge us according to our desires, it may not necessarily mean that, yes, okay, if you are a red-blooded average man that has particular desires towards the opposite sex, many of those desires are very innate and natural. And just because you have that desire in you does not necessarily mean that you're going to be judged, because part of you really, really, really wants certain things. And those things are contrary to the to the to the Spirit of God, because the natural man is an enemy to God, which means that a huge amount of what is inside of us, this self, is innately opposed to the things of God. And we need to remember that when we think about God judging us according to our desires. Because just because you may have these very powerful and deep emotions or instincts, motivations, desires, I'm using all three of those because there's some quotes that will help understand why it's important to understand the semantics of each of those and what they may in turn mean. Now, I wanted to use this because as you know me, I always like to look at some of the other cultural ideas of desires. Now, I didn't do a full deep dive in the Hebrew and Greek on desire. I found a couple words that are translated as desires, desire and desires. Here we have in Psalms 37, delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart, right? He'll granteth unto man according to his desires. It's kind of, Alma 29 kind of expands on this idea here in Psalms 37. So what does this mean? Here's a little breakdown on one of the words. There's shal, and I think the other one is like mishal. This is kind of like the more derivative version of the word for desire, okay? And the thing I really liked about this is if you look at the way this word breaks down, it's almost always translated as ask and consult. So if you look here, King James Version, ask, counsel, borrow, lay charge, consult, demand, desire, earnestly inquire. Now, I don't want to rest things with meanings, because I have a great respect for the way that things mean, but I think it's very interesting. And the thing I want you to contemplate is when you ask yourself introspectively, what do I desire? What do you consistently ask? Not just in the monotony or the routine or the ritual of prayer, because it is possible, according to Isaiah, that our rituals, that we can do these things without thought, not just the Doctrine and Covenants, take no, you took no thought beforehand, save it were to ask me, which certainly we do that all the time. There's mindless prayers that we utter. In Isaiah chapter 1, it says, what is the purpose of the multitude of your sacrifices? To what is the purpose of your prayer? And sometimes our prayers maybe are we're just running off some words there. I'm guilty. I'm not myself. But when we have the mighty prayer, the intentional prayer, a genuine prayer where we are speaking to God, palal, one of the Hebrew words for that, when we look at it in that sense, when we're having that type of a prayer, those prayers reflect our desires. And I think that's important to think about. We're judged according to our desires. Now, I'm not saying this is the exact what this is meant to be, but it's a way to look at it. Is you're going to be judged according to what you were praying for. It's a more textured and tangible way of reading that. Knowing the psychology, just simply like, man, I've got all sorts of weird desires. Some are really kooky and weird and troublesome at that. But beyond that, how do I know what I really desire? The Deuteronomy 8, right? God wants to know what's in our heart. I think there's something really important about that. Knowing how important prayer is and what it symbolizes. What you get down on your knees for and pray for consistently and persistently may be one of the greater measures of what you truly desire. So that's important. Now, I was listening to, I'll try and share a clip if I can. A lot of the clips I've been trying to share lately, they've been restricted. They don't let you clip them because of a copyright. But this was a psychiatrist who went to Harvard in his undergrad. So obviously he's super smart. You got that stuff. That's kind of what that usually means when you bust out the Harvard reference. He's someone that works with addiction. And the way that he brought it up is he said that a lot of times someone who's addicted to, say, pornography or gaming, he's big into the gaming addiction. They have this impulse like, I gotta go play this game. And then part of them comes and is like, no. maybe don't do that. And he was saying that the thing that's more representative of you, the self, your conscious, motivated desires, is not the I want to play the game. It's the person that's trying to put the resistance there. And then a lot of times people, the resistance is not able to hold up, and that desire goes through. And he says, you are not that desire. The thing that came up in the middle there to try and put a little block there, that is you. That's you. That's your desires. The other stuff, those instincts, he doesn't use the term natural man, but that's the natural man. That's your addictions. That's the problem. But I want you to remember that you were the one that tried to stand up to that. And if you think about that in some grand narrative, I don't have a good story for it. I mean, I listened to some C.S. Lewis and other things lately, and so there's a story from King Lear that's fresh on my mind with where the king, there's a moment in there where a character is blinded, the blinding, and they're doing this in this very corrupt way, and one person comes in there and he tries to stop the blinding that's being the violent blinding of this man that's occurring. And I know for those of you that are fans of Shakespeare, I apologize for just totally botching the story. It's Shakespeare, and I'm doing it no credit here. But it's one man, and it's a role in the play, and all he does is he come in there and he tries to stop it, and then he gets stabbed in the back and dies. And he's got like no lines in 11 seconds, and that's it. And they say that if I could be one person in that story, that's who I would like to be. The man who stood up for what was right, right? That's you right there against the addiction. And maybe you got you got it handed to you on a plate. But to me, it's meaningful. And this is the emphasis on why he shall give it to thee according to the desires of the heart. It's meaningful to you to understand that even when your paltry resistance at time, it adds up and it means something. And we'll conclude with that with a verse that we've explored previously in the Doctrine and Covenants. But I wanted to expand again this idea of our motivations and our instinct. And I spent some time over Thanksgiving, and I was able to go on a long walk and listen to some Mere Christianity. So this is in my mind. I was going to share a clip of it, but it didn't let me. So here it is. The moral law tells us the tune we have to play. Our instincts are merely the keys. Another way of seeing that the moral law is not simply one of our instincts is this. If two instincts are in conflict, and there is nothing in a creature's mind except those two instincts, obviously the stronger of the two must win. But at those moments when we are most conscious of the moral law, it usually seems to be telling us to side with the weaker of the two impulses. You probably want to be safe much more than you want to help the man who is drowning. But the moral law tells you, help him all the same. And surely it often tells us to try and make the right impulses stronger than it naturally is. I mean, we often feel it our duty to stimulate our herd instinct by waking up our imaginations and arousing our pity and so on, and so as to get up enough steam for doing the right thing. But clearly, we are not acting from instinct when we set about making an instinct stronger than it is. If I add a little subcontext, it needs to be something deeper, and that's the point. This is a brilliant argument that he's making on that. And not just an argument. I want to just take this as debate, because this is important for us, and a tool for discernment is what this is. The thing that says to you, your herd instinct is asleep, wake it up, cannot itself be the herd instinct. The thing that tells you which note on the piano needs to be played louder cannot itself be that note. They're separate things. Here is a third way of seeing it. If the moral law was one of our instincts, we ought to be able to point to some impulse inside of us which always what we call good, always in agreement with the rule of right behavior. But you cannot. There is none of our impulses which the moral law may not sometimes tell us to suppress, and none which it may not sometimes tell us to encourage. It is a mistake to think of some of our impulses, say mother love or patriotism, are good, and others like sex or the fighting instinct are bad. All we mean is that the occasions on which the fighting instinct or the sexual desire need to be restrained are rather more frequent than those for restraining things like mother love or patriotism. But there are situations in which it is the duty of a married man to encourage a sexual impulse and of a soldier to encourage the fighting instinct. There are occasions on which a mother's love for her own children or a man's love for his own country have to be suppressed, or they will lead to unfairness towards other people's children or countries. Strictly speaking, there are no such thing as good and bad impulses. Think once again of a piano. It has not got two kinds of notes on it, the right notes and the wrong ones. Every single note is right at one time and another wrong at the other. The moral law is not any one instinct or any set of instincts. It is something which makes a kind of tune, the tune we call goodness or right conduct, by directing the instincts. Now that is brilliant. I had to share the whole thing. Kudos to C.S. Lewis. Go buy his book. If you've not read that or listened to it, the audiobook. Brilliant. So when we look about being judged according to our desires, we have all these instincts and motivations. They're all part of us. And like keys of the piano, they have their purpose. To take a step into the psychiatric field, I know it may be a little bit, I don't want to go into any controversial things there, but we use the term disorder, and it's a good word, right? It's trying not to be overly moral. It's just something is out of order. This instinct and motivation, which can be good at times, and we don't want to morally say any instinct is just inherently wrong and bad all of the time. It has its purpose. It's about putting things in their proper order. All right, now think about that. If you are someone who's struggling with particular motivations and instincts and desires that you stumble upon frequently, I think these are important things for you to consider, especially if you're one who looks at that and is like, oh no, God's going to judge me according to my desires. Oh, please no, it's over. That was a game over. End screen there. I don't think that's what this is meant to convey, right? Especially in the initial context, it's saying that there are many who would have received it. And certainly this is this idea that God understands our limitations. Now, for me, going back to this, we've touched on this as well, not as often as Doctrine and Covenants 1:11:11, but this is one of the greatest gems of the Doctrine and Covenants. And it's verse 12, and again I say unto you, I remember my servant Oliver Granger. Behold, verily I say unto him, that his name shall be had in sacred remembrance from generation to generation forever and ever, saith the Lord. Therefore let him contend earnestly for the redemption of the first presidency of my church, saith the Lord. And when he falls, he shall rise again, for his sacrifice shall be more sacred unto me than his increase, saith the Lord. And when you read that, you can hear Elder Nelson saying, the Lord loves effort. He loves that sacrifice of our effort. Within the struggle, there is something sacred and beautiful that emerges. And that struggle that we have for righteousness, that though we fall again and again and again and again, day after day, month after month, maybe year after year, and maybe it's something that extends for your entire life. If we get up again, within the struggle, that ongoing, enduring struggle, we manifest a will and a desire that is precious and beautiful. So pray earnestly and do not faint. Don't lose your heart. Don't give up. Don't give up contending for the good and the righteous thing, no matter how hard it gets. That's the message of this. So just get back up, keep going, keep fighting is that. So I will try and share a few more things. I hope that that's helpful for you. I'll try and share some clips that are probably more wise and more helpful than anything that I can share with you. But until then, God bless you all, and until next time, bye.